Morning, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg again with another deer hunting seminar. Kind of an interesting one. You notice I'm wearing a flannel shirt here in Minnesota. You know, we've had freezing for several days up in the northern half of the state. And down here in the Minneapolis area, trees are turning yellow and gold and orange and red already. And it's almost fall. Yeah, well, anyway, the cold weather up north has probably triggered some bucks into making ground scrapes and antelopes early. That's a month early. You know, that's kind of unusual. But what I'm saying, all this early stuff, this means we're going to have an early winter this year. And in one way, that's great. I hope there's snow on the ground when we go scouting, and snow on the ground when we hunt. It's always nice to have that snow, so we can measure tracks and see them and measure them, and droppings, that kind of thing. That's an important part of the Nordberg style of deer hunting, but, although you can get along without that and still do well. But at any rate, it's kind of exciting for all of this to be happening. I can't wait to get up there and start our scouting. But next one of these days, when you're going to open up one of these new YouTube seminars, you're going to see here we are in the woods up north. But anyway, one of the things I did is prepare a map for the subject today, and the subject is about an old hunting buddy of mine named Silver.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Grandpa and Silver. Say hi, Silver.
And he lives in north central Wisconsin. So he comes, and we got to know each other at sports shows years ago. He'd be out there somewhere selling German short-hair puppies. And we'd be in line for breakfast, and we'd start talking with one another, and pretty soon we always had breakfast before the gates opened for a show. We'd sit and talk with each other. I really liked the guy, and one year I invited him to come hunting with us, and he's been coming ever since. And you know, and he's a big goat, size 15 boots, and he's Polish. And his idea of a perfect deer camp food is a sack of red potatoes, sauerkraut, and Polish sausages, which is all right. But it seems like he always brings that sack of potatoes and things up there. We have to boil the potatoes in the skins. And he could eat that every day for the rest of his life and just be happy every time. Well, but anyway, he's a good guy, you know. We're of the same religion and the same feelings about what's happening in politics nowadays, so we never got into serious misunderstanding about things like that. Always been really friendly. And many years there, when the kids would have to get back to college or back to their jobs, and during the week, you know, they'd go home maybe Tuesday and be back on Friday evening. It'd be just old Silver and I, and more than once we've taken some decent bucks while the kids were gone, and had to bring them out ourselves, just the two of us two old guys, and some of those drags were a couple miles long, including the buck we're going to talk about today. So here we go. You know, every once in a while, say something like, "That crazy Norwegian dragging me all over the woods for miles in the dark." You never see anything like that. He had a deer on his own land back in Wisconsin, and he could have breakfast in the morning and walk maybe 200 yards from his back door and get in a tree stand, and occasionally take a nice buck. And I think you've already recently seen a picture of his daughter with a real dandy she got there. Well, anyway, this was different for him. But you know, he learned to love our deer country. He just loves to be up there. He never did any tent camping before in deer country, and he learned to really like that as well. It's so great to be up there in the tent and wood stove and all that stuff. So it got to the point where he just had to come every year, which is wonderful. you know, we always welcomed him there. And he was always a big help, especially when breaking camp. He'd always be one of the last guys to leave that country, so when we got done hunting. But he was always talking about, geez, that crazy Norwegian is always dragging me all over the place in the darkness. Sometimes I thought, I wonder if I'd ever be able to find my way back. And there were a few times I didn't, and I was fortunate that he came along, and because I was looking for him, and led him back to camp. But anyway, this one particular morning was one of those times. It was just the two of us in camp. And our camp was way down here somewhere, and that we went out in the morning in areas close to the camp without seeing a buck worth shooting. And we were back in camp talking about that, and I started thinking, you know, Silver, would you be up to a good long hike this morning? And he looked at me kind of started, oh, one of those things. But it was daylight, you know, so well, this won't be so bad, and a good part of the way we'll have a nice trail to follow. So, yeah, let's go, he said. Maybe we'll get a big one out there today. So, he says, I always do better in the afternoon anyway. And one of the biggest reasons he always did better in the afternoon, because a lot of mornings you decide to sleep in. And so, well, if you'll hunt mostly in the afternoon, that's when you're going to get most of your deer. Well, anyway, got ready, and we did a considerable hike from a camp down. We went down this trail all the way down here and stopped here, and we went in around this beaver pond. There's a beaver pond there. I went there, went around that, and we got down in this area, a deer trail coming across here. And, you know, we're following deer trails most of the time when we're going to our stand sites. But anyway, follow that. I knew this area really well. And I took him up this way and parked him right there, and told him now keep an eye over in this direction because there's a big stand of red oaks over there. And it's the darndest stand you ever saw. It looks like a war zone. And the reason was, you know, when those branches are covered with acorns, they're still green. The end of August, black bears start busting down the lower branches so they can get at the acorn. They don't want to wait, or maybe they prefer to eat them when they're green, when the shells are soft, easy to chew. So, boy, they go in there and just wreck those branches, and it just looks awful in there. And so that area always looked that way. But we commonly found antler rubs in there from year to year. I remember my wife Jean and I, we'd go through this every year when preparing for one of my hunting schools, and we always found antler rubs and ground scrapes in that area as well. And some were big, of course, made by bigger bucks. And these trees, a lot of the trees, not all of them, but a lot of them were 30 feet tall. Most of them were maybe 10 to 20 feet, but some were bigger, had big trunks on them. But you walk in here and you see a lot of these big branches that are close to the ground just busted, you know, broken and hanging there, dangling from the trees, and you see this all over the place. And the reason is, about the end of August, these oaks are covered with green little acorns. Now, red oak acorns aren't really big. They're just a little bit smaller than a marble, small acorns. And you know, years ago I thought, wow, they probably would, when we first started hunting there, they probably don't pay attention to red oak acorns, because almost everywhere else where white oak acorns are available, that's the only things the deer want. I know an area we hunted in Wisconsin a few years, bow hunting. Boy, those white oak acorns sure attracted the deer, and we got some nice bucks there because of it. Well, these were just little ones. I thought, well, they probably don't mess with it. But in time we noticed, there were a lot of tracks in a spot like that when there was acorns. Sometimes you could go 2, 3, 4 years before you'd have a good crop. Some years you had no acorns at all, but when there were a lot of acorns, not only did that seem to be attracting bucks and other deer, um, but the deer that were eating acorns had venison was just delicious. Deer that are eating acorns are delicious. But anyway, I put them there and told them to keep an eye on this trail here. And that maybe you see a buck moving around in this area, the edge of this side of that stand of red oaks. And so anyway, what I had planned, I was going to drop him off here, and then I was going to go another considerable distance from there, going this way. This is an old clear cut here. And it was starting to get pretty thick by this time. You know, you could see, there could be 100 deer on there, and you wouldn't see them. A lot of brush. And anyway, I was going to go down through there, past this point. I took an 8-pointer there one year at a little point there when this clear cut was new. And there was an island down here, went down to that, of tall trees. It was not cut when this clear cut was made. And one of my grandsons, Tyler, shot a trophy class buck from a tree stand there one year. This spot here, I had a ground level blind there. But I was going to go through there and go down to the creek down here. Well, mixed timber all through this area, and creek down there. And I've been there a few times. I always found a lot of deer sign tracks and droppings along this creek, and there was a crossing right here. And I thought, I'm going to go down there and sit in that area. We had a south wind that day, see, south. This would be a good place to be. I could sit down here. Well, I no sooner got there, and pow! I heard a shot back here. Oh, Silver got one. Then Spreece, pow again. Yeah, maybe I better get back there. He might need a hand recovering this deer. Maybe it ran away or something. So I started right back. I never had a chance there. But that's a short story, you know. But there's something a lot more interesting in that story than the fact that he got a deer or a buck here. When I started making this map, I started thinking, holy cow, my boys and I, we've been hunting this 30 years, and this is a square mile. It was kind of late before we started hunting this particular square mile. And for years and years and years, we always got bucks in there. And he probably still could, but we got other areas that got our interest for a while. But I started making little X's around here, like this stand of red oaks here. There's there are 2 bucks recently taken there by my son Ken. There's one here where my son David got his first really big buck. It was really a beauty, a big 10-pointer, right there on that edge. And old Silver got one right here. And we'd taken one there in this mixed timber, and on the way there, one there, one there. And down here, Ken, over a period of 5 years, got a big buck in there every opening morning, 5 years in a row. And different places, sometimes at ground level, brush piles, or sometimes tree stands in the area, but 5 of them in there. And I think, 2 or 3 of those are on the wall. They're not really dandy bucks. And I took one there, and Ken got one here one year, and he got another one there. And I was sitting down there and calling, I said, my goodness, this square mile, it's about a square mile here, has been really a good the best square mile in the entire area we hunt for taking big bucks over the years. And when I thought about it too, when you consider that at least a third of them were taken at these stands of red oaks, you'd have to say they played a major role in our buck hunting success in that area. But before I even made a map, every year we always check different stands of red oaks. We have some others in other areas, but we always check them for fresh deer signs, you know, and like in October or September when we're scouting them. Well, we're still scouting, getting ready. We're scouting 2 weeks before the deer season begins, and we're looking for deer signs. And sometimes what you find, it would be easy to miss, but take a look down here. Here we've got some recently made droppings. They're doe sized. They're 1/2 inch from end to end, not counting the little nubbins at the end. But remember now, when we're hunting here, we're hunting during the breeding season, and it's important to know where the does are located. Well, there's a reason does might spend a lot of time here, and other deer as well, and bucks. This ridge here is covered with red oaks, and red oaks means acorns. There we go, we got acorns this year. And this is going to be a place to hunt. We've got several areas in our deer country that have a lot of red oaks growing on them. We're going to have to pay special attention to them from here on as we scout. This means there's going to be deer feeding here opening morning. And you put these things together here. Droppings, acorns, red oak leaves, hot spot. We've taken lots of big bucks where there are a lot of acorns on the ground. And we check them for, you know, acorns on the ground and little shells that, you know, the deer, they bite the acorn and the shell breaks and they spit the shell out and swallow the nut. And so we find little fragments of those all around. And probably red squirrels, we have a lot of red squirrels up there. They probably account for a lot of those broken shells as well. But what you see a lot of deer droppings there in that area like that, and a lot of tracks, you know, off-tail tracks. You know, deer are accounting for a lot of those broken shells on the ground. So there's just little things. And when you have a lot of them, they'll even dig in snow for them for a while after the first 4 or 5 inches of snow hits the ground. They'll dig in there, but usually when it gets to be 6 or more, then that's the end of the acorn season for the deer. I'm gonna have my son John insert some video footage taken by John while we were, I took hunters of my school, a bunch of guys, into that particular stand of oaks. And you'll see what we found there when we were in that area. This is a feeding area. You see the leaves on the ground there? They're red oak leaves. And this little stand of red oak that goes around just a small area here, it circles around, goes back that way a little bit. Drops a lot of little marble-sized acorns in the fall. And I've run into whitetail here in the fall many times feeding along this little ridge on these acorns. But those are awfully good spots. You know, wherever you hunt, acorns, elk trees that produce acorns are probably a lot more important than you realize. Oh, I know. I've known deer hunters who hunt in Wisconsin for years that absolutely hunt nowhere else but in stands of white oaks, and they do all right there. But usually, you know, it's short-lived. And, you know, we think we've been hunting here for 30 years, only 4 have been taken here, and 5, plus some that nearby. This one here was actually hit on, while Ken was hunting on the edge here, and it went over here and went down. So, but anyway, those are always spots to keep in mind when you're hunting whitetails. Now, I was saying, you know, making a map of your hunting area and marking where you've taken bucks over the years is a good exercise in preparing for a hunting season. Keep reminding yourself, geez, I got to get over there and check that. I haven't looked at that one for years, and now I can't wait to go there this year and check it out. I'm not going to check this one out because I know Dave will be looking at that, and Ken. 2 of my sons will be looking at that this year and counting on hunting there. Ken has been hunting there now for the last couple years close to this particular stand. But it kind of depends on whether there's acorns or not. But from what I've heard, it was a good acorn year again this year. So those will probably be places where we'll get a buck this year. And anyone who hunts here will probably do well too. This is a pretty good sized one. So actually 2 guys could hunt this one, as long as you're downwind or crosswind near the margins. Now, what's interesting about that, some years ago my son Ken and I established a trail across this big spruce bog on this trail. Now spruce bogs are moss, that one has moss a foot deep in it, all over the place, and you step on it, you step down through the moss. You can be under a foot of moss when you're not on a deer trail there, and there can be water down there. Gene and I used to go across there in the spring, and these puddles of water, you could walk right through them because it was muskeg. You know, that moss was keeping frozen water underneath the moss frozen for a long time. We could be there in May, spring, and walk through all these puddles, and there was just ice underneath them, so you wouldn't sink down there. But any other time you went in there, you would be sinking down into the muskeg below, mostly peat below the moss, and that swamp became affectionately known as Bootsuck Bog. And so there was a number of years that guys that came to my hunting school had the pleasure of going across Bootsuck Bog to get to this area over here, and that's when I took them over there. But this is always interesting, and this year I'm going to spend some time talking to my sons who have been hunting over in this area a long time. I used to go over there every year for a while, hunt this region beyond, and but gee, we can't keep ignoring that one. I think somebody can get a buck there this year. So anyway, the exercise, I didn't realize until I started making this map how important this has been to our overall success over the years. Well, anyway, I get back to the story. I didn't have time to hunt here. I had to start back, and it was quite a ways to go. And I got over here, and there was Silver sitting right where I left him. He had a spot where he was well hidden by small white pine trees, just 3-4 feet tall, 6 feet tall, bunch of them in one area where he was sitting. And he was right where I left him, and I thought, well, did you get it? Yeah, he said, it's laying right over there. So the keel was a nice buck, and you'll see in the picture here. What's kind of interesting about it. Well, anyway, we had a friend that used to come up every year and hunt kind of with us. Yeah, his name was Chuck. He's from a suburb of Dallas. Come up every year. He loved the area. He'd come up every year, and he kept coming up to me. He had to quit deer on it. What a terrible thing. I get a card from him about Christmas every year, ask me how we did. I'd walk through camp, we'd invite him for dinner now and then, and we'd help him drag deer out once in a while, quite a ways out here on this trail here. What we had to do after we got that buck is go back to camp and get our toboggan, big plastic toboggan and stuff, so bring him out, and us 2 old guys. And when we were coming back, our friend was coming down the trail, and we told him we got a pretty big buck. We were thinking, oh, gee, I think it might be close to 300 pounders, a pretty heavy one. It wasn't quite that big. It was about 290 live weight, but that's a lot of buck. And in fact, this guy from Texas gave us a scale we could use. We could put it in a tree branch, and we could weigh deer with it. Kind of raise them up there and weigh them, and be accurate about weights of these deer, and not just guessing. And so I was told him, so well, we got one that might be at 300 pounds, and so he offered to help, and he went out there and helped us drag the thing all the way to camp. So there were 3 of us. We were able to get it back without that much trouble. But anyway, what was interesting about that is we got that one back, and when Silver went back home with his deer, a few days later, his deer hunting season opened in Wisconsin. Theirs always opened after ours did. And he got another one about the same size on his own land, maybe a couple hundred yards from his own house. And so that's kind of different hunt from them. He sent me a picture with the two bucks together, which was kind of nice. That was a good year for Silver. And it was fun to see. We'll show you a picture of that here shortly. You can see that one. But you'll see his buck, and yeah, boys came back from going to school, and oh, look at that big buck. Who got that big buck? We had two bucks hung there. I had a 10-pointer, it was a smaller rack on it, but huge body on it. And then that one that we got to it. So old Silver and I were all done hunting for that season. We were kind of just enjoying hanging around camp and talking. He always had a lot of time. You know, Silver loved collecting old rifles and different cartridges. He loved shooting. And once in a while he'd get a piece of wood and whittle out a beautiful gun stock for one of his guns. He was very talented at making gun stocks. And he'd bring them to camp, and yeah, just gorgeous work that he did. Even checkering, and but always an interesting guy to talk about. And well, but we're getting old, us too. But anyway, it was a good year. But you see, look at this map. Isn't that something? And then when you start to realize why a spot is more important, why you've gotten so many bucks in one place, you should never forget that. I think one of the things too is that we don't all gang up in one place, and we don't hunt in the same spot twice every year. You'll notice all these X's are not at the same spot. You know, a lot of hunters will go back year after year and sit in the same tree, same spot, year after year after year, which is not good for buck hunting. No good for buck hunting, because older bucks have excellent memories, and once they've learned you're sitting in some tree, they're going to be checking that tree year after year from a safe distance. And when they find you there again, or smell your odors in the air, familiar odors in the air, so oh, he's back, he's in the tree. Nothing to worry about as long as I just spend the rest of this hunting season over here or over here, a good ways away from that tree stand. So that's not good. So not one of these bucks was taking in a tree from a tree stand or a stand side at ground level where a buck was taken during the previous year. All of them were different ones. If we all sat in one stand there, one stand there, and one there, or one here, one there, every year, we'd be fortunate to have taken 4 bucks in that area during that long period of time. Well, the reason we don't use one tree stand to hunt bucks year after year in one tree, same place year after year, because older bucks today, you know, after being hunted by tree stand hunters, well, for 34 years now, you know, on portable stands, those survivors are really good at finding and identifying and avoiding hunters in tree stands. And usually it happens within the 1 to 4 hours the first time you use a new tree stand. They'll find you, they'll identify you from a safe distance away, and from that time during the hunting season, they'll stay away from it, stay out of sight of it. And they're good at that. It's just nothing, you know, really easy. There's a lot of ways to change that, but if you keep trying to hunt from one tree stand or attract buck to one tree stand year after year, including at a food plot, you aren't going to take very many big bucks at that site. They're smart and they have excellent memories. They never forget what you look like They can identify while you walk or while you're standing. They recognize what you look like, and they'll never forget how you smell. Year after, I don't care what you're wearing or what you sprayed on yourself to eliminate odors, you can't get rid of them all, and not for a long time. You know, that protection, any protection you might get from things like that is short-lived. You know, by the end of the day, you're already smelling pretty well. Well, next morning when you get up, you know, your nose gets accustomed to all this. But you get up in the morning before you go out and sniff the inside of your hunting coat. Then tell me there's no odors on that hunting coat. Or you might wear underwear that suppress, release body odors into the air. But after you've worn them for a couple of days, smell that underwear on the outside and tell me it doesn't smell, it doesn't have human scents anymore. That, you know, you might be able to put it in a dryer in there for a while and get that charcoal in the fabric, get it back to collecting your odors and keeping from being emitted into the air. But then on the other hand, you might be getting some of those odors like your wife put in there for like Downy for making fabric softer, or clothing that was washed in a soap that has odors in it. And your dryer's all full of those odors. You'd have to have a dryer that isn't used for that purpose. Those odors are hard to get rid of. So, at any rate, they're going to smell you no matter what. And eventually, and a lot sooner than you realize. And they're going to remember you. And they remember, oh yeah, he hunts in that tree over there. And he uses that trail to get there. And it's going to start avoiding those. So, no. We move to new stand sites not only every year, but every half day, because older bucks are so good at finding you and avoiding you there. We don't want to waste any half day of hunting at a stand site that's already been identified by a big buck living in the vicinity. It's just a terrible thing to be sitting there thinking, oh geez, this is day 2 and now I'm back in the same stand site. And we know that. You may not be thinking that way, but we know. The chances are that the buck I was hoping to take here is not going to be seen from this stand site to the rest of the hunting season. We don't want to even waste a half day of that. So we change stand sites every half day. So, you know, we might have gotten all these bucks in this square mile from different stand sites, but there were probably 3-4 times as many stand sites in the area where we didn't get one. You know, you don't get one every time. There's always reasons why the buck might not do what you thought he was going to do on any one particular day. And some of them might have turned out to be lousy from the outset, especially ones that we selected 2 weeks before hunting season. And we always have our stand site selections and preparations done at least 2 weeks before the hunting season. Because while scouting early, we just go scout. We run willy-nilly over the whole area, checking things out, and we know we're alarming deer while we're doing that. And we don't worry about that, because by staying away for 2 weeks before the opener, all those deer we alarmed will be back in their normal areas, or home ranges, doing normal things, during normal hours every day. And we can count on them. We tried doing it 1 week before the opener, and that didn't always work out that way. Now, during the hunting season, we scouted beginning on day 3, we scout every day using a special wolf-inspired method of doing it. It doesn't alarm deer. If you try it any other way, you're just going to screw it up. It'd be like a bunch of still hunters, people wandering around your hunting area, and that gets to be untenable for experienced, mature whitetails. They're going to leave the area for the rest of the hunting season in cases like that. So, anyway, you got to know how to do it properly. And using the same method, it'll enable you to go to and from stand sites without alarming deer along the way, and so the deer are going to stay there. Now, isn't that interesting? You know, we've talked about that before, And we'll probably get back to that again another time. But that's an important thing to do when hunting older bucks. So if you don't mind taking younger deer, yearlings and fawns, or younger does, or maybe an occasional 2.5-year-old buck, a small spread and maybe 6 points, maybe 8. Well, you can maybe sit in one stand side a lot. But if you're determined to take mature bucks that are 3.5 years of age or older and have decent antlers on, you're not going to do well by using one stand site, overusing any stand site. So keep that in mind. Well, anyway, so yeah, I didn't mark, I used to hunt over here a lot. There could be all kinds of X's over in that area and up here. And even over here, out this way where my sons Ken and Dave like to hunt. But, so that's something to think about too. This is the last of big bucks, stories about big bucks taken by hunters in the Nordberg deer camp over the last 30 years, different ones. And we could have used a lot of other bucks as examples as well. But I figure one decent one per hunter should be enough. And there was that, and so we're at the end of that now. Now, I'm going to start a new series here pretty soon. Besides, I'll get back to hunting methods from time to time, different things that come to mind. And we got a big, long list of perspective examples, including how a new guy, and that guy that doesn't know a lot about deer hunting is trying to figure out where to hunt deer, how to do a good job of scouting, and that's a lot tougher than most people realize. I want to do one like that. But there's an interesting series that I'm going to start about conditioning. When I was in college, I earned a degree in psychology, but it wasn't human psychology. It was animal psychology, of all things. Did a lot of research, and I earned a degree with a major in something called experimental animal psychology. And I remember Dr. McCorkadale was my advisor in psychology, asked me one day, shaking his head, what in the world are you ever going to do with that kind of a major? You couldn't imagine. How would you make money doing that, is what he was thinking. And I said, well, I was thinking someday this would be a valuable training when studying wild animals, particularly whitetail deer and black bears, and more lately, wolves. And I thought this might be valuable training in the future. And a part of all that research had to do with conditioning in various ways, doing things that would make those animals react a certain way, when they're confronted by something, whether dangerous or friendly or whatever, they react a certain way. And, without thinking about it, us hunters are conditioning whitetails all the time. In many ways, negatively or positively, we are. And in the case of positively, it would improve your likelihood of taking older bucks. Older bucks can be conditioned by doing certain things. And some of those things we only learned during the last, 30 years. Tipped off by the gray wolves living in my study area. They showed us some of the things we could do to condition whitetails, especially older bucks in our case, that would make them more vulnerable to our hunting. And so, the same is true of black bears. Older black bears are very difficult to hunt. You know, they can get to be as old as 30 years old, and they live in huge areas, up to 33 square miles. And that's a hard bear to hunt. And partly because when they get to be large, they hate warm weather. Oh, hot weather is terrible. They like to, during the day, they like to lay down in damp or even wet lands. In big bog area, old spruce bogs where we hunt, or elder swamps, and not move at all during daytime. They just want to go. They'll move at night when it's cooler. And one of the problems with hunting older bears is you have to somehow coax them to a stand site earlier than they want. You want that bear to be anxious to come to your stand site, and come there a little earlier, which we found is bad. You should never hunt older black bears in the morning because they'll already be there when you get there, and once you startle a big alarm, a big black bear at your stand site, and he runs away, he's either never gonna come back there again, or he'll only come back at night. Well, that's no problem for them because they're nocturnal animals to begin with. Oh, but you can condition them to come a little bit earlier, at least in the evening, you know, and that would be during the last half hour or hour before darkness settles in, which is a half hour after sunset. But that's when we've taken most of our bears, is during that last hour. And you won't even see them then if you do things wrong beforehand. And there's 20 ways to do things wrong. And I get letters and I get calls from hunters all the time. We're having a problem, can't figure out why this bear only comes at night. And that's a good sign it's a big bear, a nice bear. And you've done something wrong to convince them it's unsafe to be there during daylight hours. So it's no big hardship for the bear. Oh yeah, come at night anytime. That's fine with the bear, and they're smart about that. So, but conditioning is important in bear hunting as well as deer hunting. Well, enough said about all that, but we'll be talking about that in the future, and that's going to be fun to get started on it. One of the things I want to mention too is, you know, this is not a big sell on my book, so don't click and go somewhere else right now. Just pay attention here because you're gonna benefit from that. When you go to my secure Shopify account for buying a book, go to the Shopify store. It's secure. You get there through my website. You get there, you order a book, it's secure, like I said. You can buy an extra one of my earlier editions that I still have available. They aren't all available. 5 of the 9 are available. That you can, and some are getting real low in number. But you can get one of these free. One of my early editions of Whitetail and Almanac. Look at how small the early ones were. But I created one of those almost every year for quite a while. And when you go to that store, the Shopify store, you will see this book with a picture of another book under it. One of the others that are available. And so when you order that book, you get that one free. You can get one of these free. Those used to sell for $10. So that's a $10 savings right there, and there's a lot of extra information that will come in handy. Each time I came up with one of these, it covered one or more new subjects that came up during my years of doing hunting-related research with whitetails, with wild whitetails. So some new subject I thought, oh, this is really important, and that's going to be in my next book. And usually on the banner there was a list of the subjects that were covered in that particular book. So this book covers, well, there's a lot of hunting, whitetail lore you probably don't know, and that's so important to buck hunting as well. But there's 6 new fair chase, mature buck effective stand hunting methods in there. They're all stand hunting methods in there. And I've already come up with another one, 7. So Anyway, that you won't find in any of my books. So you can get a free book. You save yourself some money when you buy one, and you'll see what's in each one of those books before you decide which one you want to have. So that's something to remember. You can get a little something for free there besides the new book. So keep that in mind, guys. Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to say goodbye for now. And be sure to poke that subscribe button, that red one right down there. Would you please? It costs nothing, just takes a couple, maybe not even a minute of your time to be involved there. And there's some advantages to doing that, which you'll learn. And then also the thumbs up button. That's almost as important. Hit that one as well. These are important to my future of presenting deer hunting seminars to you guys. I sometimes think maybe I'm pretty secure there because I've got more than 1,053,000 visits on my YouTube channel now. That's kind of amazing. So, but I want to be able to keep this up as long as possible. And being 85, who knows how long that's going to be. But we'll see. So do that, would you please, before you sign off? And with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.